Welcome to this screencast. This is Mrs. Majkut, and this is my top 10 books for summer reading 2019. The first title is called In the Neighborhood of True by Susan Kaplan Carlton. This is a historical fiction novel that takes place in Atlanta in 1958. The main character is named Ruth Robb. She's 16 years old, and she's recently moved from New York City to her mother's hometown of Atlanta because her father has passed away unexpectedly. Ruth is half Jewish, and she learns quickly that it is a Christian environment. She is hiding her Jewish heritage because the KKK is active in Atlanta. She ends up falling in love, and then there's a synagogue bombing, and Ruth has to decide what she's going to do. An excellent look at Atlanta in the late 1950s, together with the debutante balls where young women are entering the social scene. Excellent historical fiction. The next title is Mary's Monster by Lita Judge. This is a young adult biography in graphic novel format. Mary Shelley was the author that wrote Frankenstein. She wrote it on a dare about writing a ghost story. The book is written in free verse, and together with the haunting watercolor illustrations, outlines her life. Did you know that Mary Shelley was kicked out of her house by an abusive stepmother and then became pregnant as a teenager out of wedlock with her first love? Lots of chaos and hardship. Excellent. Next up, we have Blood, Water, Paint. This is a gorgeous novel in verse featuring a real-life 16th century painter named Artemisia Gentileschi. She lived in Rome in the early 1600s, and when her mother died, her only choice was to either become a nun and join a convent or help out in her father's painting studio. She did become a world-renowned painter, but not before her father passed off her beautiful work as his own, and an art tutor that was hired to help her get better at painting rapes her. Artemisia decides to pursue the rape case despite tremendous pressure to not do so, especially in the 1600s. Next up is The Unwanted, Stories of the Syrian Refugees, written and illustrated by Don Brown. This is incredible. It tells the story of the Syrian refugee crisis that began in 2011, and it features the exodus out of war-torn Syria in incredibly painful ways. Don Brown is a well-known graphic novelist and does a lot of nonfiction. You could choose anything by Don Brown and you would love it. The next up is Internment by Samira Ahmed. This is a futuristic dystopian novel in which all Muslims have been rounded up in the United States and sent to live in a relocation center. They actually use the Manzanar camp, which was used during World War II to intern Japanese Americans at the outbreak of World War II. 16-year-old Layla is the main character. Her father is a professor and her mother is a doctor, and they get taken out of their house late at night to go to this internment camp. She finds some friends that she hasn't met yet in the camp, and they plan how to end the internment of Muslim Americans. It's an incredible story, and it's interesting how she uses social media to address what's happening. Could it happen in America today? The next up is Front Desk. This is by Kelly Yang. This is realistic fiction. The main character is a middle schooler named Mia Tang, and her Chinese immigrant family manages and cleans a local rundown motel in California in exchange for staying there for free. What they don't realize is that it's more work than they bargained for, and the abusive owner, Mr. Yao, he cheats them, and they're afraid of retaliation. The motel has its own community tapestry of regular patrons, and they work together to fight prejudice and injustice at the hands of Mr. Yao. Find out what happens in Front Desk. Next up is Hey Kiddo by Jarrett Krishoka. This is a graphic novel memoir of being raised by his grandparents because his mother was in jail and on heroin for most of her life. Jarrett was an incredible artist as a young person, and it features some of his drawings from that time in trying to figure out what to do. The subtitle is How I Lost My Mother, Found My Father, and Dealt with Family Addiction. And as you can see, it's a National Book Award finalist. Next up is Made by Stephanie Land. This is a nonfiction memoir about living and working in poverty as a young mother with a daughter to support as a maid, getting by with absolutely nothing. This is an interesting look at poverty in America and how it's always the children that suffer so terribly. Very well received and New York Times bestseller by Stephanie Land. My last two, Illegal by Owen Colfer. This is a fictionalized graphic novel about a pair of brothers from Ghana who are displaced refugees. They trek through the Sahara Desert. They're trying to find their sister who has escaped to Europe. They attempt to float across the Mediterranean Sea to get to Europe, and it really is a harrowing journey. Find out if they make it in Illegal by Owen Colfer. Lastly, we have Educated by Tara Westover. This is an interesting read. This is a memoir. This is a young woman whose parents were survivalists. When she was born, she didn't have a birth certificate. She never went to school. She never saw a doctor. Her parents were very fearful of anything civilized. They lived out in a rural area in Idaho, and she never went to school before she ended up at Harvard. Her parents homeschooled her, but it comes at a cost. An excellent memoir. This is Educated by Tara Westover. That's my top 10 for 2019. Please stop by the library. And if you need any other suggestions, we'll be happy to help you. Thanks.